In 2010, the Association of Shelter Veterinarians published the Guidelines for Standards of Care in Animal Shelters. This document can be found on their website, www.sheltervet.org. Please click the button to begin your training. The ASV identified a need for this document because the care of animals in shelters remains unstandardized and unregulated at the national level. Only 18 states require shelters to be registered or licensed, including Illinois, and state regulations are inconsistent and often inadequately monitored. A task force of 14 veterinarians was created. The first step was a comprehensive literature review, followed by the writing of well-researched and referenced white paper identifying standards of care that would meet the needs of animals and animal welfare organizations. The goal of the document is to provide information that will help any animal welfare entity meet the physical, mental, and behavioral needs of the animals in their care, and to provide a tool to identify minimum standards of care and best and unacceptable practices. The spirit and intent of the guidelines are to raise the standard of animal care throughout our industry and to create a roadmap that will aid organizations with ongoing self-assessment and improvement. The National Federation of Humane Societies, the Society of Animal Welfare Administrators, the National Animal Control Association, the American Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, and the Humane Society of the United States have embraced the spirit and intent. The foundation of the guidelines is the 5 freedoms, developed in 1965 in the UK to address animal welfare and agriculture. The ASV believes the 5 freedoms are now recognized to have broad application across species and essentially speak to the fundamental needs of animals that remain constant regardless of setting. The 5 freedoms are: freedom from hunger and thirst by ready access to fresh water and a diet to maintain full health and vigor; freedom from discomfort by providing an appropriate environment including shelter and a comfortable resting area; freedom from pain, injury, or disease by prevention or providing veterinary care; freedom to express normal behavior by providing sufficient space, proper facilities, and company of the animal's own kind; and freedom from fear and distress by ensuring conditions and treatment which avoid mental suffering. The guidelines have 12 sections: management and record keeping, facility design and environment, population management, sanitation, medical health and physical well-being, behavioral health and mental well-being, group housing, animal handling, euthanasia, spaying and neutering, animal transport, and public health. To identify good or bad practices, the guidelines use the following terms. Unacceptable is used to highlight practices that must be corrected as soon as possible to provide an acceptable level of care. A must indicates that without adherence to the recommendation, the delivery of a minimum level of acceptable humane care is not possible. And should implies a strong recommendation. Best practices are identified in the guidelines as ideal or best. While the authors note that achieving ideal or best practices in every aspect of operations is ultimately preferred, they acknowledge that not every organization is capable of achieving this goal in every circumstance. Therefore, shelters should strive to meet all ideal practices wherever possible, and should attempt to ensure that they are adhering to all practices identified as a must, while avoiding any practices identified as unacceptable. Great, there's a 67-page document out there. How does this apply to me? Partly based on this document, we have made changes to our facility and set expectations on animal care. For example, cutting of cage holes to enlarge each cat's space and the expectation that every cat will have a hiding space. All animals will have an elevated resting place and be given something soft to rest on. Enrichment is another important element to our standards of care, providing regular social contact, mental stimulation, and physical activity. Enrichment can be defined as a process for improving or enhancing animal environments and care within the context of their inhabitants' behavioral biology and natural history. It is a dynamic process in which changes to structures and husbandry practices are made with the goal of increasing behavioral choices to animals and drawing out their species' appropriate behaviors and abilities, thus enhancing an animal's welfare. The goals of enrichment are to increase behavioral diversity, positive utilization of the environment, and the ability to cope with challenges and to decrease the frequency of abnormal behavior. There are various types of enrichment: social, occupational, physical, sensory, and nutritional. Social enrichment can be contact with conspecific, or members of its own kind, so dog and dog or cat and cat, or contraspecific, with members of a different species, so human and dog or human and cat. It can also be visual or auditory without contact, for example, a dog seeing and hearing other dogs. Occupational enrichment, which is exercising the mind or body, can be psychological, such as solving a puzzle, or physical, such as getting exercise. Physical enrichment relates to the physical environment, size and complexity of the space or furniture, such as hide boxes, toys, and beds. Sensory enrichment can be visual, auditory, smell, tactile, or taste. Music and aromatherapy are two examples. Nutritional can involve the delivery of the food, how often an animal is fed, on what schedule, how it is presented, how long it takes to process, or the type of food given. Of course, when providing enrichment, safety is critical. It must be safe for both the animal and the caregiver, and it must be species appropriate. A scratching post for a dog wouldn't be a very good enrichment. Enrichment doesn't have to be very expensive or high-tech. Think milk jug rings. Be creative and remember that variety is important. Playing with the same toy day after day can get boring, and every animal is an individual. What is fun and entertaining to one animal can be frightening to another.